Is it possible to put love at the heart of a state care system? Not kindness, not empathy, not compassion, although these are clearly part of it, but love. It's the central theme of the independent care review that's currently investigating Scotland's care system, and it's a challenging one. Everyone wants to be loved. Every child needs it. But how do you make the idea of it part of a professionalised service that's been constructed around the careful language of rights and responsibilities? SallyAnn Kelly is the Chief Executive of the children's charity Aberlour, and Rosie Moore is co-chair of the Independent Care Review's Love Working Group. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rosie, the Love Working Group, what does that do? What is it? Great name.
Oh, I know, it's a brilliant name. What doesn't it do? I suppose the Love Work Group came about from the very early stages of the review, and before that, children and young people with lived experience of care have been campaigning to put love back at the heart of the care system for years. They just want to feel loved like any other child. So the purpose of the Love Working Group is to think about love in its broadest sense. So the love between children and young people and their biological families, love between children and their carers if they want that and that's appropriate, love for their communities, making sure that children and young people have a say in where they live and what school they go to, love for hobbies. If a young person before they came into the care system had a love for playing the guitar, for example, how we do our best to make sure that love for playing the guitar can continue after they come into care. And love for pets, love for anything that is important to that child and young person and that they want to be a part of their life. How can we ensure that it stays important for them and they get to continue those relationships with whomever or whatever it is that they love doing?
Now, so much of that sounds absolutely self-evident, kind of duh, yes.
Yeah.
And yet, SallyAnn, love as a concept, as a word, is sort of fraught with professional hazard, isn't it? Can you give us a sense of the current barriers to putting at the heart of practice the sort of thing that Rosie's describing?
I think that we have come through a period where there has been quite a lot of professionalisation of social care, residential care for children. And I think one of the downsides of that professionalisation is a move away from concepts such as love and compassion and the actions associated with love, and a reluctance for professionals to use the word love within their professional relationships. And I think that certainly my experience as Chief Executive of Aberlour is that I encourage our residential staff to love our children, because it's through that love that the actions that the child needs to fulfil their rights and to strive as a child and fulfil their potential can happen. So I think there has been quite an intense debate and discussion over the past 3 or 4 years, but I think many of us are pretty comfortable with the concept of love for children. And from my professional perspective, it's not something that we should be afraid of, because for every child in our society, for my children, love is a prerequisite to them succeeding. Their sense of acceptance, their sense of belonging in their family. For children who are in the care system, who have experienced loss and separation, then they need adults around them who offer them that love.
As you well know, Rosie, because you were in that system yourself growing up, I mean, what did the experience of feeling that you were loved or not feeling that you were loved mean for you?
I mean, this is something that I think I've reflected upon now I'm an adult, and I can think back on it clearly. I didn't recognise it as a teenager. I was a teenager when I came into foster care. It's a difficult one because when you come into care, more often than not, sadly, you don't come in and live in the same place for your care journey throughout. You can be moved multiple times, and that's common. They can experience 7, 8, we've heard multiple stories of children, young people who've experienced up to 50 different placements. They've been moved 50 different times to different families, to different residential units or services. I think I had about 7 or 8 different foster families that I lived with. And as a teenager or as a child, you just begin to think, well, what's the point? What's the point of letting my guard down and getting to know this family? What's the point of building a relationship with the adults whom I'm living with, because I could be moved tomorrow, and that happens, sadly. And you, as a child or a young person, can come home from school one day and you find out that evening or the next day or that weekend you could be moved with no explanation, no warning, to a different family, and you might not have a say in that. So it's hard, and as much as you might want to build those relationships, you can just end up thinking, well, what's the point?
And is that something that you're actively wanting to get changed, the number of people that children go through, as it were?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is something that is still present in the care system just now. And the types of service we provide in Aberlour, we often have children coming to us in very distressed states who have been through multiple placement breakdowns. Now, what we also know is for children to heal from the trauma that they've been through, they need predictable, reliable, safe and trusting adult relationships where they feel loved.
Yep.
You can imagine the turmoil that countless changes in placement might cause for children. And the children, when they come to us, are very, very distressed. So we have a huge job to do in terms of trying to build the trust that Rosie talks about, to try and help those children regulate their emotions in a way that helps them manage their day-to-day life. So cutting down the number of care placements for children is essential, but I actually think that trying to support families to try and prevent the children coming into care in the first place is our biggest challenge in Scotland. We could do so much more with getting into families early and helping them. If we talk to our children about the things that would have made a difference to them when they were wee, before they came into care, the response we get most often, above and beyond anything else, is if somebody had just come in to help my mum or help my dad or help my mum and dad, we could have avoided coming into care.
I mean, could that be described as, without being patronising, teaching families how to love, the consistency required, the boundaries required in love, you know?
So a lot of our children come from fairly poor backgrounds, and a lot of their parents themselves have had quite difficult childhoods. So they're living in poverty. They're experiencing the stress of living in poverty. That is often complicated by mental health issues or addiction issues. So what you have is parents who do love their children, but actually at times struggle to provide them with the basic standards of care that you would expect.
We all know love of almost any kind is impossible to define at the best of times. We've all got a sense of what it is, but it's very hard to define. You know, it can have negative connotations in some contexts as well. We need definitions, do we not, in this fraught world? And how do you find language that is going to work in a professionalised service, which it must be? Rosie?
I mean, we've been on quite a journey as the Love Work Group and the Care Review, and one of the first things that we did way back when we just formed together as a group was to try and define love, which was a massive challenge because it's so subjective, and what would be love for me would be different to you, SallyAnn. And then you add the complexities of children who are coming from different backgrounds with different needs. So we created a working definition right at the beginning, and we took it out to professionals and staff members and asked, what do you think of this? We used the language of children, young people themselves who had spoken to the review about what love meant for them. And the feedback that we got was that it's never going to please everybody, because even as staff and professionals, we still all have different understandings of love. But what they did like was the examples that children and young people had given. So the examples were really, really simple, everyday things: feeling trusted, feeling safe, having a nice environment, having food to eat, being able to make memories on a weekend, being able to have someone support them through parents' evenings.
What about hugs? Are foster parents allowed to hug children?
This is an area again that's led to some debate, because in some circles there was a belief that you couldn't hug, and in fact I do believe that at one point there were procedures in place in some local authorities that dissuaded foster carers from hugging children or residential staff from hugging children. There is nothing legally to stop carers from hugging their children. In fact, we should be encouraging that, because actually that physical contact for children who are in a space where they can receive it positively is really, really good for children. What you do need to be thoughtful about is those children where hugging is something that they find threatening because they have, you talked about different interpretations of love.
Yeah.
We work with a lot of children, Sally, who come from abusive backgrounds, so they're quite confused about physical contact from adults.
Well, exactly.
So you need to be led by the child.
But also, perhaps, as well as the child needing protection, actually, do the adults who are involved in caring need, in this day and age now, a certain degree of protection in case loving actions are misinterpreted? Do you know what I mean? It's difficult these days for well-meaning people.
What I would say is that the residential workforce in Scotland, the foster care workforce, is highly regulated in terms of inspection by external agencies. We have very clear policies and procedures in place. I think one of the problems we've had in the past is that regulation sometimes has led to quite a risk-averse approach. So people have been afraid to show that physical affection to children. And you certainly need to think carefully about how you do that. But again, it's about taking it at the child's pace and understanding what they need at a particular time.
Finally, Rosie, just paint us a picture of what the benefits could be if we could put love at the heart of the care system in the way that you envisage.
I think the benefits would be countless. We'd have children who would be able to flourish and to reach their potential and to feel safe and to grow up with a sense of worth and value and recognising that they have people around them that love them and care for them, whoever those people may be. But if we have children that are growing up that have that support and that love and that nurture around them, we are going to have adults that grow up that have a sense of confidence, of worth, of better well-being, that are going to reach their potential and are going to have those social networks and those relationships to be able to thrive as adults as they deserve to.
Thank you very much. SallyAnn Kelly, Chief Executive of the children's charity Aberlour, and Rosie Moore, Co-Chair of Scotland's Independent Care Review's Love Working Group.